Happy Thursday. Man, that took a long time to get going. Welcome back. Another episode of Go Find Yourself. I had to confirm it was Tuesday also because it's not. It's Thursday. Happy Thursday. Did I say Tuesday?
I don't know what you said.
Oh, man, it's been a day already. Anyways, we're here with your favorite day, Crypto Arms Race, and Ceara's back. So I don't know, like if our viewership is going to drop off a cliff today or maybe skyrocket,
Probably.
one of the two. We'll find out. We'll see who
Christine
the
is way
real.
easier on the eyes than I am. So
Oh, I don't know. We had some funny jokes prior to the pod yesterday, but maybe not safe for work, so we'll leave them for offline. Anyways, okay, we got lots of stuff to talk about today.
yeah.
Crypto Arms Race. Where are we going?
Well, we're going to jam through a couple Commonwealth countries, New Zealand and Canada. We're going to talk about some warm weather countries, Costa Rica and Bermuda, and then we're going to talk about the EU, primarily France. It's been a busy time. There's a lot of regulation going on. There's a lot of countries trying to decide if they're pro or anti. There's a lot of countries who are anti, but trying to frame it as pro and vice versa. It's a very strange time, which is why it's my favorite topic.
I love it. And I also love that maybe we're going to stay overnight in some of these tropical paradises. So let's do that. Anything else we want to share with the peoples before we get going?
Nothing else.
Live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Like, share, subscribe. Help us get the word out. Let's freaking go.
Do you have your banana hammock on for Costa Rica?
It's the Borat onesie, but it's underneath my shirt, so we'll save it for the end of the pod. Any live viewers at the end of the pod gets to see the Borat onesie, and everybody now cancels their live viewership of me. Yeah, we don't want to see it on Ceara because
let's not do that.
It doesn't cover much. Anyways, awkward. Okay, Costa Rica, let's go. We're going surfing in Costa Rica. And our Costa Rican friends today have told us that it stands out as a forward-thinking nation in the realm of cryptocurrency, paving the way for its use in wages, widespread acceptance, and offering a conducive environment for crypto miners and companies. The nation's laws allow employers to pay in cryptocurrency, seeing it as a commonly accepted asset, albeit with certain legal and logistical hurdles. The widespread use of cryptocurrencies in the retail sector, despite the banking system's reservations, along with Costa Rica's excellent internet infrastructure and renewable energy resources, positions the country as a favorable location for cryptocurrency ventures. I would totally move to Costa Rica. Have you been there?
I was just thinking that. I was like, why don't I go to Costa Rica then?
I actually spent a few months in Costa Rica, and it's amazing. Like, it's such a cool country. But anyways, this is really interesting because there's a lot of like kind of the small cottage industry type businesses and so on in these countries, and how they're getting this point of sale is really cool. What are your thoughts on this one?
Okay, so there's a couple technical pieces that I think are interesting, which is that Costa Rica doesn't qualify crypto as money. They just qualify it as means of payment. And that's how they've managed to have some pretty easy regulations for people to get paid and that kind of thing. So typically your minimum wage still has to be paid, but then you can get all of your bonuses in crypto. You can trade tokens, that kind of thing. They call it quasi money. And so long as it's for a real world asset, it is taxed just kind of like cash and not like capital gains. It seems like a pretty interesting piece. The other thing that I think is notable here is the concept of the mining. So I didn't know this until I was reading about Costa Rica to perform this episode, but apparently they're leading in a lot of renewables and they're applying that to their Bitcoin mining as well. So just kind of something to maybe keep a pulse on. We talk a lot about the crypto capital of the world, and it's the first time Costa Rica's come up for us.
I think it's worth noting that there's a lot of, and this is kind of why many of us came into crypto in the first place, is a lot of these countries that are emerging, developing countries that you would probably consider second, third world type developing nations. But this type of technology and infrastructure really allows them to kind of catapult into a little bit more mainstream accessibility. And so this is really interesting. We automatically just assume that when you go to, countries in Latin America, often the internet blows and often they're going to be way behind technologically. But I think a lot of countries, especially due to the fact that the US and and major Western jurisdictions have really been slow to adopt crypto meaningfully. It's a great opportunity for these countries. In Costa Rica, again, I would have assumed, I was there over a decade ago, I would have assumed the internet probably still sucked. But this is great. I think it's awesome.
So they are considering moving things forward a little bit. What I just said about them having quasi money, and that's how they're having crypto, and saying, hey, you can't actually get your full payment in crypto, you have to make minimum wage and then you can compensation. They are looking at updating that and regulating it. So Costa Rica is contemplating legislation that could restrict Bitcoin's use for everyday transactions, but actually allow you to get paid in Bitcoin weekly. This move aimed at addressing KYC and AML concerns might challenge the country's crypto-friendly reputation, but crypto tech firm Jan3 highlighted potential impacts of Bitcoin's freedom of use, while a lawmaker from their Congress, Johanna Obando, is advocating for crypto regulation to actually benefit Costa Ricans. So long story short, what they're looking at is saying, okay, we've only been considering Bitcoin, we've only been considering crypto as quasi money or top-up money or interaction money, like peer-to-peer money, but how could we have you use it as fiat? And I wonder what they're learning from El Salvador on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little fuddy on this one. So I love most things that Costa Rica is doing. I really hate this in a sense, because what you're essentially doing is you're saying Bitcoin is okay and we'll accept it, but it has to adhere to our fiat rules in this way. And I think you're going to find that a lot of people aren't going to love that idea that Bitcoin was, the whole point of Bitcoin was to be uncensorable. And if you require KYC and AML for all Bitcoin transactions, even P2P, peer-to-peer, like sending money from one person to another, that's going to be a huge problem, I think. I think it's going to be a non-starter. I think it completely goes against the ethos.
This one because they're actually providing regulation like clarity. And you usually
I don't mind regulation and clarity in general, but what we're seeing almost everywhere is that kind of the power balance between lobby and incumbents and regulators, and then of course innovators. And right now, everybody's kind of fighting to maintain a certain amount of land grab, I guess. And incumbents are obvious. It's obvious. Like that's why look at Costa Rica. Oh, the banks are kind of skeptical of crypto still. Yeah, of course they are, because they don't make money off it. And of course, the monetary policy is skeptical of crypto because they can't influence it. So I don't know. This one kind of sucks. I don't mind it, but I'm a little fuddy.
I'm surprised that you're fuddy. Before we move on and go to the next hot place, there's a thing in Costa Rica that's also really cool if you're a Bitcoin maxi called Bitcoin Jungle. I just linked it in the comments. So they are talking about creating a circular Bitcoin economy. They're talking about how Bitcoin can be peer-to-peer across borders, which we already know, but they're looking at how to onboard people in this area more. So if you're in that land, if you're in Costa Rica, if you want to visit Costa Rica and you want to check out an open source community build Bitcoin project, check out Bitcoin Jungle.
Totally agree. Okay, let's move a little bit away from Costa Rica. I think it's a little bit east to Bermuda. And in Bermuda, HashKey Group has initiated its HashKey Global Exchange in Bermuda, offering spot trading for 21 digital assets, including BTC, ETH, USDT, and USDC. With ambitions to become one of the largest licensed exchange clusters globally within 5 years, HashKey Group, a unicorn status firm headquartered in Hong Kong, is expanding its offerings to include futures trading soon. Oh boy, another centralized exchange registering in Bermuda.
This is a big deal. So people believe that HashKey was able to get in because I think it was Coinbase was able to get in about a year ago. We're going to talk about Coinbase in Canada as well. So they kind of waited for somebody to set precedent and make sure that there were no major pushbacks. And now HashKey is really actually working hard to take massive market share around the world. So
I guess we'll see. HashKey's, I mean, they've been a great venture investor in the space for a long time. They've done a lot of things. So, I mean, relationships are very, very solid, especially throughout Asia. I mean, I don't mind this. This is what I expected kind of Binance and Coinbase to be doing, is trying to, as regulation is coming out, trying to expand their kind of compliance in different jurisdictions and try to eat up market share. But for some reason, Binance is doing the opposite. Kraken has been kind of quiet entirely. I haven't heard anything about Kraken, honestly. And Coinbase is focused on Base. So this is kind of interesting.
It's also
Coinbase
interesting
is
to me because
entirely focused on base. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry, there was a lag, I think.
I was literally finishing a stupid sentence. Go.
Okay, well, Bermuda is going to see a lot more coming their way after this precedent has been set by Coinbase and then by Hashkey. People are really seeing that this is going to open up the market. So about 2 days after we saw Hashkey get approved, Bermuda regulated Realm Insurance has introduced a suite of 5 crypto coverage products, including cyber, wallet custody, and professional liability insurance, focusing on crypto trading and staking on ETH. This initiative addresses the significant need for comprehensive insurance in the crypto space, traditionally limited to commercial crime and specie markets. But I think that this is notable because we're going to see more and more and more come into these warm weather climates. After a couple major people got approved, it's going to be a huge waterfall.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's the case. We've kind of talked about this with respect to many jurisdictions lately, and Bermuda is probably no different. I mean, it's one thing for a country, Costa Rica and others, to come out and say, hey, we're super crypto forward. We've got all these laws that are going to make things a lot more favorable for you. Yes, yes, yes. But you need these certain licenses or approvals, and we're going to approve 1 or 2, or in Bermuda's case, 2. And so what does that say for us, people like us? What if I wanted to go and register something in Bermuda? Could I? Maybe. Could someone that has never done anything offshore in the space figure out how to go register and be compliant in Bermuda? I mean, we spent the better part of 4 years trying to figure out offshore corporate structure and compliance and all this stuff for all of our entities. It's not simple. Anyways, so hopefully, as regulation comes out and as we get more kind of traction, I think globally, hopefully they come up with a better process for approvals, because waiting for 6 months, a year, 2 years that's the exact problem that we had that stifled innovation in TradFi. So hopefully we can move on from that. Speaking of moving on,
offshoring in New Zealand yet?
Actually, yeah, we have a company in New Zealand, believe it or not. Seriously, we do have a company in New Zealand, but we're going to fly over there and talk a little bit about what their Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Andrew Bailey, has said. He advocates for a comprehensive review of digital asset regulations to foster the cryptocurrency industry's growth, with recommendations focusing on collaboration, education, and potential CBDC. The initiative contrasts with the Reserve Bank Governor Adrian Orr's skepticism towards CBDCs and cryptocurrencies. This push aims to position New Zealand at the forefront of digital asset advancements. I want to make a small clarification before I get your thoughts on this one. We do own a company in New Zealand, but not because it's a regulated or legal operating entity. It's because there's a whole bunch of rules that you actually pay. Crypto isn't really recognized as a taxable asset there. So if you have fairly large, low cost base, high market value assets, it's a good place to hold them. Anyways,
this is something that I like.
What do you
think that it's required for them to be competitive, because we often view New Zealand as kind of the part of the Western Commonwealth or something, but in reality, they are very near Asia, very Asiatic market. And we saw that Hong Kong is doing a lot of upskilling. We've seen that, I think it was a couple weeks ago, we talked about Thailand doing upskilling. We've seen other countries like really cracking down that are nearby, like Indonesia, saying, hey, we don't actually want crypto here. So if New Zealand wants to be competitive, they need to be doing this. I don't love the CBDC component, but I do like the forward-thinking regulation. I like the tax incentives, and I like the skill shortage training.
Yeah, I really wish that politicians and these pundits wouldn't. I really wish they wouldn't conflate some of the politics in with the reality of the situation, like especially with respect to CBDCs and the rest of cryptocurrencies. Like, for some reason, politicians think if they like CBDCs, they're also pro crypto, and if they like crypto, they're also pro CBDCs. In my opinion, they're so freaking different. And my criticism of CBDCs is entirely because of the central bank aspect of the whole thing, not because it's a digital currency or it lives on the blockchain or any of that stuff. So anyways, just a thought.
Let me just talk about the central bank really quick, because last year in June 2023, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand declared an increased focus on monitoring stablecoins and crypto assets. but said that they don't want to have any regulatory oversight, and they're not interested in participating on chain, and they're not interested in digital currency in that way. So I thought it was interesting to see that less than a year later, they're talking about CBDCs. They said, hey, we're not intending to regulate crypto. We think you should be cautious. We don't want to have a hand in that. We don't want to have a hand in the digital asset world. And now they're like, oh, we should probably backstep from that and actually regulate it and treat it as a currency and introduce our own.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things like this is kind of common, like seeing the flip-floppiness. We saw it from BlackRock. We've seen it from many U.S. politicians. We've saw it in the U.K. We've seen it in Canada. We've seen it in Europe. Like it's happening kind of everywhere. And I think when a lot of this was first proposed to some of these regulators and entities, they really just didn't know. It was like this novel thing that no one really knew. But now it's hard to ignore. I mean, ETFs in the U.S. for Bitcoin, the proliferation of market cap and projects globally and so on and so forth. I don't know. I think it's just a matter of time before they don't have a choice. Like they've fought it for as long as they can, but now the people want it. I mean,
and especially with the bull now, like,
yeah,
probably a good time to onboard people. It's probably a good time to flip flop,
Yeah, someone was I saw on Twitter. I think it was maybe Pomp or someone. I can't remember, but someone was talking about how there's over 10 million people in the U.S. that have more than $1,000 worth of current cryptocurrency currently. That's a big swath of the voting public, and a lot of them are generally Democrat voters because they're that kind of Gen Z-ish area, XYZ, Gen YZ. And so they're generally Democrat leaning. And so this is actually, the politics in the US may be playing in our favor because hopefully there is a good demand in the US for them to just figure out how to deal with crypto so we can move on with life. And it's starting to permeate, the normal public, which is great.
Well, the more we permeate the more normal public, the more scams there are, especially during a bull market.
Yeah. So this is really interesting, especially because I know we didn't talk about this yet, but a Wells notice was sent to Uniswap yesterday, which is the first one that Uniswap's ever got, as far as I'm aware. And Hayden came on X, of course, and was kind of making a statement about how the Uniswap protocol has had over $1 trillion of trading volume and has been forked and implicated in other smart contract protocols over 1,000 times, which is insane. What that tells you, though, is there's a lot of people that duplicated technology, continue to duplicate a technology and launch it in different places. One of the benefits of open source, but also one of potentially the drawbacks of open source is that a Uniswap clone, just because the code might be similar, is not necessarily Uniswap. There's a whole bunch of things that Uniswap team does and so on and so forth. Anyways, where this is coming from is the FMA, the Financial Markets Authority in New Zealand, has alerted investors to fraudulent activities by clones of licensed crypto exchange, BTC SWE, and another named Grandeur Capital Pro. These scams deceive investors with promises of recovering lost funds and installing malicious software for unauthorized access. Amidst the growing interest in cryptocurrency in New Zealand, regulatory bodies emphasize the importance of vigilance against such deceptive schemes. How do you suggest people protect themselves against this?
Do your own research. Thanks. It's hard though, right? Like if you're new to crypto, if you're seeing that there's a boom, if you see that your local government is saying, hey, maybe let's try Bitcoin, or hey, maybe let's have a CBDC, you start Googling stuff, you start clicking on stuff. It's hard to tell. It's easy to get scammed, right?
Yeah,
so
I think a lot of
that people are cloning the licensed exchange in New Zealand because New Zealand says, hey, we have good crypto news and we're going to regulate. And people are like, oh, I should get on the boat. And it's a dangerous time. The boat is rocking.
The context of which they're cloning in this case is generally just the front end. It's a little bit different than like the open source on-chain Uniswap story that I gave before, but I wanted to bring that in because it was a big deal yesterday, obviously. Wells notice for Uniswap. Anyways, I hope that we see less and less of this. I hope that the Googles of the world and Twitter and YouTube and all of these other places actually build meaningful guardrails into what people are saying and how people can advertise these scams. I mean, we can't still to this day advertise on Twitter for some reason. Yet all of these scam projects have ads all over the place on Twitter, have ads all over the place on Google, and so on and so forth. So the key is, I think, in many ways, is double, triple, quadruple check the URLs. Make sure, if you can, you don't hold any assets on central platforms, especially if they're registered offshore, especially if you aren't 100% sure that they're legitimate. Just be careful. Like, I mean, this is more of a public service announcement than anything, I think, is, yes, it's happening in New Zealand, but it happens everywhere. I've been scammed way more times than I'd like to admit. And I would argue that I spend all day, every day here. And so it can happen really to anybody if you're not paying attention or have a lapse. But
Absolutely.
be careful.
Yeah, we all have a story. All right, let's have a 5-minute layover in Canada so that we can.
I'm glad it's just a layover because nobody wants to
talk
stay
to
there.
the EU. Okay, so I mentioned earlier Coinbase and with how they've been trying to capture the world as well. Well, they have become the first international crypto exchange to gain a restricted dealer license in Canada, which is pretty significant for Canadian operations. This achievement comes as the company faces regulatory challenges in the US, emphasizing its commitment to adhering to local regulations and contributing to a secure crypto trading environment in Canada.
So I think in some ways this is great. Obviously, Canada, which is my native country, has actually been quite forward with crypto regulation. I don't necessarily love it, how they've regulated literally all of it as securities, period, full stop. I don't necessarily love that, but what I do love is that they actually made a process to come into compliance. You had 1 month. So anybody that could come into compliance did within a month. So it wasn't like, hey, we're going to have all this regulation and maybe in a couple of years you can have some approvals. It was, we're going to make these approvals really quickly. So, I mean, they've done some things correctly, but a lot of the companies that ended up in Canada were relatively small, haven't expanded beyond Canadian borders. And so it's only a matter of time before a large international firm comes in and expands the product offering. Coinbase has way more assets that you can trade and way more connections to blockchains for bridging and so on than any Canadian exchange by a long shot. And so I think this is definitely really good. It's also good to see, again, that some of these licenses that, especially for international firms that are usually reserved for TradFi incumbents, to see Coinbase in a new market acquiring one of these licenses, I think is great. So I'm not funny on this one.
Also come out on April 4th. They did a couple of interviews about how their big goal is to increase adoption of Canadians. So I don't know that they're even going to eat the lunch of some of the major prominent exchanges here. I think that their goal is for new to come on. And like you said, they have way more options to use. So that's kind of cool. But what I like about that is like, hey, maybe we'll actually get some more crypto in mainstream in Canada, because it's still a little bit like you see a Bitcoin ATM and like it looks pretty shady. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, Coinbase just has such a mature process for getting assets in, getting assets out. It's as efficient as possible. The fees are still higher than any of us would like, but they're a lot more predictable on platforms like Coinbase than they are on some of these other ones. Coinbase has a lot of corporate infrastructure and a lot of other things that these other exchanges don't have. So in terms of payroll and managing accounting and all these different things, Coinbase has a lot of really interesting tools for that. So I think it's good. Normally I'd be funny about something like this, but I actually feel pretty positive about it.
Well, you were a bit funny about the regulation about securities. Can you tell us about stablecoins in Canada?
Yeah, so this is another one that's kind of interesting, but some of the major players in Canada's crypto industry, including Coinbase, Kraken, and Wealthsimple, have collectively urged the CSA, Canadian Securities Administrators, to reconsider its stringent approach towards fiat-backed stablecoins. With a compliance deadline nearing, these entities advocate for consultation and regulatory collaboration, warning of potential exclusion of stablecoins from Canada's crypto market. This is actually quite problematic to me, and I'm super fuddy on this one. So what we've been encouraging, jurisdictions to do, because they listen to the pod and then specifically listen to us, is spend some time actually engaging industry stakeholders so that you understand what the problems are. And I think Canada in some ways has done this fairly well, but in this particular case, the stablecoins, it has not. And there's very few stablecoins available on Canadian exchanges. You can't get USDT, I don't think, anywhere. in Canada. So there's essentially just USDC. There's no DAI as far as I know, or EURC or any of these other ones. So something has to be done. And pretty soon the compliance deadline comes up and all of these all of these stablecoins are now non-compliant.
Yeah.
So that'll
30th.
be interesting. Sorry?
April 30th, which impacts how, a lot of us interact in that market.
Well, especially like for people like yourself and others that are paid in crypto. I mean, the Canadian crypto infrastructure is a big freaking deal. And there's a lot of cash lost. There's a lot of leakage of value in the current process, especially in Canada.
Oh my God.
I use Coinbase in America a lot, and it's by far, at least from what I can find, the best pricing, the best fees. It's not attractive. It still sucks. It's still vulturistic in my opinion, but it's the best that there is. All right.
Let's head to the EU. So okay. We've been talking about MiCA for years. I feel like forever. And all of these EU countries have to come in compliance with MiCA right away by the end of 2024. And despite all of that, despite some of them coming into compliance early and sometimes going over and above what the compliance is expected to be, MiCA regulation, markets and crypto assets regulation, is maybe not as helpful as people had thought that it might be. So the European Securities and Markets Authority reports no increase in euro-dominated crypto transactions. The MiCA regulation, which is going to aim to enhance investor protection, includes specific provisions for stablecoins, has not altered the euro's role in the global crypto market. It has not increased or decreased adoption.
Who would have thunk?
Well, we talk a lot about how regulation will probably help with adoption and help with operations and what have you. So it's interesting to see that maybe that's not going to work the way we expect.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like there's a bit of a cart and a horse here, and which one kind of comes first. Generally, the regulation comes, everybody's annoyed, and it slows the market for a certain period of time. Everybody figures out how to adjust, and then the actual benefit possibly should be shown. So right now, we're kind of in that regulation has come in. People are trying to figure out how to react to it. Here's another reason that I think we're not seeing this massive increase yet. And again, this as a builder, this goes to my major criticism about regulatory rollout globally, is if I'm thinking of giving access to anybody that's a member of the EU, to any of my protocols or any of my assets or tokens or anything we're doing, I have to think, hey, by the end of this year, am I going to be compliant in the EU according to MiCA? And the answer is no. And so then I say, okay, so what does that look like for me? I have to get which protocols do I have that have exposure to the EU? And then what regulatory licenses do I need? And can I even get them? And so because of all those unknowns, you don't know if you can get them. You don't know how long it's going to take or how much it's going to cost because there's not a kind of replicable process yet. I think people are just sitting on their hands and say, hey, once we figure out a way to actually see protocols meaningfully come into compliance quickly, I don't think we're going to see that uptick in activity, personally.
It might not even be worthwhile. Lead us into what's actually happening on chain in Europe.
Yeah, the EU has essentially seen a concentration of 90% of all crypto activity, trading. Yeah, all crypto trading has been done on 10 exchanges. And this raises concerns over potential risks to the crypto ecosystem from failures or malfunctions. Binance alone counts for about half of the market activity. The report emphasizes the regulatory challenges as most crypto exchanges operate in jurisdictions with minimal regulations.
But I think this is exactly what you're saying. Okay, let's wait and see. Let's sit on our hands and see what MiCA is going to do and how someone's going to come into compliance and so on and so forth. But then also, is it worth me trying to penetrate this market where 90% of the EU trading, which hasn't increased, is only on the giants? I don't know. I probably wouldn't take that risk as a DEX. I'd probably go to Costa Rica.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to somewhat agree with you. I think it's worth noting, though, like this isn't that big of a deal, in my opinion. Concentration, the kind of 90% of activity in the top 10 companies in the space, that's like every tech sector ever.
Totally.
Pretty much. Like, I mean, that's always the case. It's always the behemoths, and every now and then an upstart, especially in a mature space, can become a unicorn, but it's rare. right? It's the exception, not the rule. And in crypto, we think everything should just become unicorns instantly, and that's just also not how it works. So I don't know. This one is like, I'm not really that concerned that there's a concentration. What I don't love about it is that there's such a concentration on centralized entities.
Yeah.
In the EU, and that I think takes us, if we can't find a way for the regulation and compliance to also encourage and enable on-chain activities, then we've taken 5 steps back in terms of, the innovative impact of blockchain. Hey, should we save France, or you want to quickly
No, I want to do France. So because we're talking about MiCA, I just think this is really interesting because France is essentially coming out on top of MiCA and saying, hey, we're actually going to have extra regulation. We're going to do more than they've asked for. Remember now, if you want to be a crypto influencer who influences people in France, to take a course and have a certificate first. But they are also trying to make sure that there is innovation, and Paris is still trying to compete to be the blockchain capital of the world. And part of one of the ways that they're doing that is releasing a 150 million euro fund for Web3 projects. So I think France is in this interesting space where, yeah, they're going to be super compliant and they're going to have a very clear path to regulation, but they're also going to entice you to bother to operate there, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think there's like a bit of a land grab in the EU because the regulation is consistent across all countries. So all the countries are saying, okay, let's say we'll accept the MiCA regulation and not deviate too far from it. I mean, that's not surprising. But then their next thing is, okay, how are we going to capture market share? Mm-hmm. And France is saying, hey, here's the rules we have to work with. What can we do to be more attractive than Germany or anywhere else that companies may set up, Switzerland, et cetera, et cetera. And so to me, I think this is pretty cool. Honestly, yeah. I think France, although I have a lot of criticisms of France in general, I think this is actually a really, really cool initiative.
I don't know why you don't like baguettes, but.
Oh, I don't like what? Baguettes? I love baguettes.
All right, that is your crypto arms race. We went to some warm weather. We talked about CBDCs a little bit. We talked about regulation a lot. You can see that things are really starting to flesh out, I think, in regulation around the world. Yeah. This time last year, we were saying, no one is regulated. Who's going to do it first? And now it's like, everyone is regulated a little bit. So it is.
Who's going to screw it up the least? Everybody's doing it. Who's going to screw it up the least? Yeah, I mean, exciting times. The whole point of the show, just a quick reminder, is to help you stay abreast of what's happening, maybe take some of these things that appear fuddy and bring them back a couple notches, and same thing, some things that might encourage incredible FOMO and aping in with no risk management. Hopefully we can help you tame those ideas a little bit. Anyways, live show, Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Like, share, subscribe, hit that bell, help us get the word out and spread that love with other crypto connoisseurs or budding crypto connoisseurs. And with that, today I say to you, Ceara, go FUD yourself.
FUD yourself.
Bye, guys.